Hey everyone, back again with another episode of the weekly SEO. Today I'm joining with Tylor Ryan. Hey Tyler, how are you?
I'm good, Roman. That was a hell of an intro. I wasn't expecting that. I was really like, oh, look at you. That was cool. Thank you for that.
Of course, no problem. I am so eager to have you in this stage because thank you very much for your time. As you
Of
are
course.
an CEO of a company, it's really hard to, I don't know, bounce with the time, especially at the end of the year. So thank you very much again.
Of course,
Uh,
man.
all right, so everybody, how is doing? Hello.
Hello.
Today we are going to actually Tyre is going to cover a really specific maybe topic like SEO quick wins, hacks. I like the word hacks by the way. I don't know what kind of hacks, but it should be really interesting. So let's see what Style Ryan is gonna cover today. But firstly, I want to ask, what's Clint?
Yes. So Clint is my digital marketing and growth hacking agency. Clint is the Danish word for a cliff, basically where the mountain meets the water kind of thing. And with my experience in a lot of the startups that I built out here in Denmark, I found that a lot of them didn't have much in the way of foundations until I came in and built them up. So I don't know, as a CMO that was working and building up all these companies, I struggled to find a halfway decent agency that didn't want to get their hooks in forever, which who can blame them, but allowed me to basically get the foundations that I needed and then basically say, see ya afterwards. So that's kind of the idea behind a growth hacking slash digital marketing agency named Clint is build up these companies and give them a jumping off point. And so far it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, Clint is very easy to spell, like Clint marketing, but it's somehow like very similar to client. When I said Clint marketing to my team, what client? All right, client marketing should be.
You're the first to say that actually, because with the old logo, it looked dangerously similar to a derogatory term used to describe a woman that you didn't like.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we had to play with the letters a little bit.
Cool, cool. All right, so we have a lot of people here. Everyone came to join you today, so the stage is yours right now.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will share my screen and break everybody off a little piece of the remix here. So hold on. And yeah, we're live. Okay, cool. And hopefully you guys can see my screen without the notes, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, I'm going to jump in. Roman, feel free to jump in anytime you like. If we're running out of time, I know we have about half an hour, 25 minutes here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm going to move fast. But the good thing is, like, this is obviously recorded, so you can jump back anytime you like. So, a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and founder of Clint and Growth Secrets. Previously, six-time startup founder, 14 years of marketing experience. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I've been here in Denmark for the last 6 years. I work with a lot of different types of companies, but these are the ones that I built to exits back in the day. When I say back in the day, a little over 2 years ago. So Planday, Genie Belt, Actimo, and Valuer all have had what they call exits. So one IPO, two acquisitions, and one merger. That's what you really want to happen when you're building up a company is sell the thing or find a way to basically exit. So these are some of the accelerators that I work with. Constantly getting into conversations with new ones. I dig this shit. Like you'll see by the energy that I put out on this stuff, like this is my jam. And I've really found that it's a calling for me because the stuff that I'm teaching now are the things that I wish I had known 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago. And if somebody could have saved me 6 months out of my life or 2 months or just 2 days, then I feel obligated to help out. So I love working with small, medium, and large companies. I don't think I've ever actually gotten a real client out of all of the different presentations for I've done for so many of these different accelerators. I just like helping out. And within reason, I'm happy to do that with anybody that connects with me on LinkedIn within reason. I've already explained kind of the name, and that's Clint, Klint. Check us out, clintmarketing.com. Growth Secrets is my online masterclass. I have chopped and sliced the price down to a super low price of $49, so I'm making something on it. But yeah, it's a growth hacking course. It's 8 hours. Cool. This is kind of the growth pattern that you're looking for, and these are some of the projects that I've built out. And you see this kind of incremental growth type of look, and that's what I'm trying to kind of bring to people today. In terms of my goal, it's purely just to provide value. I don't I don't know. I don't have any like real prerogative behind this other than to just give back. So feel free to throw some questions into the chat if you have any, and I'm happy to try to dig into it. Specific or vague is fine. Just don't be that guy. Yeah, I I have a pretty good understanding of the people that turn up to these types of podcasts, and it was kind of how I got my start in the earliest days, was just consuming as much information as possible to start to understand how things worked, what systems played together, and how I could do that for my own projects or my own companies eventually. Usually I'd have an interactive portion, but that ain't happening. Same slide twice for no reason. So there you go, mixing it up. There's usually a lot of theory that I throw into this stuff to kind of help give people a bit clearer of a perspective of where I'm coming from with a lot of the different growth hacks and quick wins when it comes to SEO. I think the only theory that I really want to impart on people, and it's so hard depending on where you're from, the nature of your company, even your fucking personality sometimes, is getting into default mode. And it's so hard to get people out of this default mode. So, like, an example of default mode would be me asking somebody to grab a beer out of the fridge for me. So they'll walk up to the fridge, stand there, look it up and down, and come back and be like, dude, the fridge was closed." And it's like, yeah, okay, I got it. So go up to the fridge, open the door, pull out the beer, close the door, take 10 steps back. Some people really want this like really granular explanation. And I often have to tell people, like, look, there's going to be barriers that I can't anticipate. So you have to either find workarounds or find examples where this already exists. So, like in web design or SEO for that matter, there are already formulated models that are clearly in use, that are successful, that you do not have to reinvent the wheel. So if you're trying to figure out how do I do something in the way of, let's say, keyword research, do not try to come up with a strategy on your own. There are people that have already sculpted perfected strategies that have spent hours, days, months, maybe even years doing it. So please do not try to do this from zero. There are plenty of existing frameworks. So this is also the only other kind of big theory thing that I'm going to go into, which is the purpose of content. And anything that we do related to marketing when it comes down to content, whether it's social media posts, long form articles, even webinars, whatever the case is, good content informs, engages, delights, and provides value. But the whole reason that we do this is to either make money or put somebody in our pipeline that eventually will pay us. There has to be an eventual end to the reason behind making this stuff. And it kind of brings me to my first area of focus, which is what makes for good content? How do we make good content? How do we pair it with SEO? There's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I find it super interesting that most people are like, what should I write about today? And it's like, why are you doing that? That's crazy off the top of your head. And that's how most marketing departments operate, to be totally honest. So there's this great Ron Swanson quote, which is never half-ass. How did I fuck that up? It's like such a short, never half-ass two things, whole ass one thing. Meaning if you're going to produce something in the way of content, it's got to be good. And usually I come up with a handful of different examples. There's the video from Dollar Shave Club. If you look up team building games and When I Work, or Elon Musk's resume from Nova Resume, sometimes there's these singular pieces of content that can propel entire companies along. So the example that I did within my company, I was the CMO of, was Valuer, and it was 50 examples of corporations that failed to innovate. And this was basically the thought process of what is the thing that people are so scared of happening if they don't buy our solution. And that actually ended up being our top ranking article by, I think it took up like 75% of all traffic for the better part of 2 years. That is super important to know exactly what is the intent behind somebody asking the question of what happens if I don't do this, or what do they ask before they think about buying. This is taken directly from Brian Dean of Backlinko. This is basically one strategy of figuring out what the user intent is. There's lots of different types of searches. Some end with a 0 click, which means the user basically looks into Google and they are like, hey, what's the capital of Copenhagen? I don't need to click onto a website to see, a little answer snippet there that says, or capital of Denmark, it'll say Copenhagen. Navigational is getting from one place to another online, and there's obviously a good incentive for clicking on that. I do find that a lot of brands are doing this really cool thing called brand hacking, but that's a whole different conversation in terms of hijacking somebody's navigation when it's a much bigger player. Commercial and transactional are the last two, and those are incredibly important. These are basically where somebody's taking out their wallet and they're like, here, take my money. The only reason that somebody's looking up Star Wars posters or best drone cameras is likely because they're ready to buy. Or if somebody's specifically asking about a price comparison, pricing guide, that's super transactional. I am ready to buy. I already talked about this example, but feel free to look it up. It's one of the more interesting articles that I produced over the years that continues to garner attention, and it's one of the things that I don't know. I could go on for days about content strategy. I'm going to move on. Listicles are often really useful when you have people that don't necessarily have a ton of marketing competencies, and it's basically just a aggregation of information. So that means like best blogs for whatever your industry is, best podcasts for whatever your industry, best webinars, best books, best magazines, best websites, best guides, best whatever. And the more that you put this together, the more you realize like, oh shit, I could get a virtual assistant to do this, or this is fine for an intern to actually build up. So what you can see off to the right side, this was Architecture Quote, one of the companies I started like 3 years ago that basically was an aggregator for new and interesting projects for architects. And you just start building the list of what are the different groupings of things that people might search for within these places. And this actually generates a fair bit of traffic. And then your goal is to convert those people into your pipeline to eventually convert them into users. But I mean, feel free to screenshot it, go for it, go nuts. But these are really easy articles that you can generate fairly quickly. Is my mouse doing that? I guess it is. This is another. I wouldn't. Yeah, it's a steal directly from Brian Dean. Brian Dean of Backlinko, who came up with this concept of the skyscraper technique, which is basically finding your competitors' best pieces of content and making sure that, great, if this works for them, it's likely to work for me. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail explaining it. I have tons of material on this, but the real easy way to do it, I use Ahrefs, is to basically look up your competitors, find top content and hit export, and then decide whether or not it's relevant for your users and whether or not you want to put in the time to basically outrank them at their best pieces of content. Moving right along, I think it's incredibly important that people put together long form content. I get into so many bizarre arguments with journalists these days where it's like, yeah, nobody reads articles that are 1100 to 1200 words, at the longest. And it's like, okay, dipshit, that's definitely not true. Nice job. So do a little Google search and start looking at the top articles within whatever search that you're putting in that's relevant for buying signals within your industry. And these are a couple of screenshots from SERPIQ. Can't remember where the other one was from. Maybe it was BuzzSumo. Either way, the average amount of words for an article that's first or second place on Google is anywhere from 2,300 to almost 2,500. In terms of the average shares by content length when it comes to social media, you're looking at 3,000 to 10,000 words. So it's a long way to go to say that when you cover a topic in super deep detail and it is super relevant, you're going to do fine. So there's lots of examples of this working really well within my own experience. And these are some of the top articles, and the numbers on the left of that are basically the length of the article. So it is imperative to actually create long form valuable content. If it's not valuable, you don't have to create something long for the sake of it being long, but if it's not valuable, then don't do it. Content velocity is one of my favorite ones. There's a ton of people that are really big proponents of this, and I'm seeing it pretty consistently online, which is come up with 75 to 85 articles in a year. And that means that you're really pushing out a ton of content all at once. And I've seen this across a number of players. I've made efforts to do it myself as well. And you're seeing that Google is giving a little more street cred to those that are consistently putting out high value content. Now, not every article is going to be a home run or a giant success, but when you are consistently putting out quality long form content, you own the game. And you can look this up. Any of the bigger competitors within your niche, often it comes down to total pages crawled. Like it's that frustrating. So I often build a potential article list off of the top of my head just to get started. And I know that there's some areas of intent that I want to cover. It's neither here nor there. The rest of the stuff that I end up packing into this is a mixed blend of the skyscraper technique and also taking stuff directly from the keyword universe. And I'll show how to create that, which is basically building up a list of different keywords by some of the different intent signals that you could build out. Skyscraper Technique 2.0 is basically just making better content and adding a little more structure to it, embedding a few more keywords that are synonyms, similar enough, adding a table of contents, which is easy enough if you're using WordPress. It's a plugin, providing plenty of examples of, you'll find examples to this or whatever the case is, internal and external linking, and of course, skimmability. I don't know why I put that slide in twice, but there you go. I'm going to skip past some of this stuff. Titles, don't give a shit. Updating old posts is actually kind of okay. So we've been doing a lot of that relatively recently, and I'm continuing to see a ton of success out of it. Like we're jumping up like 200-300 keywords per post when we do it. So I'm gonna continue to do it till it doesn't make sense to, or I have to stop. So yeah, every time that you're updating some of your best posts, the posts that are already doing really well, you continue to grab more of those keywords that are in and around the sphere or space that you're trying to focus on. I embed all kinds of different media types, whether it's infographics, click to tweets, video, you name it, GIFs, just so long as they're made into MP4s and they're inside of my WordPress. I always create blogger guidelines, whether I'm working with guest posts or it's just internally, it's incredibly important. This is totally out of place, but I'll go into a little bit of this because I think I hit it a little later. But having something in the way of all these different intent signals kind of mapped out allows you to create a really strong content calendar that then you can kind of pick and choose what areas you really want to focus on, and based off of what you're learning from these different initiatives and different things that happen in your business, you're going to continue to get closer to what it is that people actually really want to hear from you and what they're going to consume. I always create briefs before I ever start writing any article. And there's different versions of briefs, but the idea is you have a focus keyword and then some of the keywords that are in the periphery. It's basically just clustering some of the keywords around. I really can't stand when writers are like, oh, I need to spend at least a week researching. It's like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? You have to build these content pieces out as you go. Of course, you want to frame some of the areas, but there is no excuse for people sitting down and watching tons of videos, documentaries, reading long form papers and white papers without putting anything into action. You need to build as you go. Otherwise, you're just wasting time. The mind does not retain all the stuff that you've built out. And I've already covered this, but I do think that if you are just picking topics off the top of your head, you're never really going to get there. So the structure is SEO research first, put things into clusters, use the correct tools, build out a brief, and then start writing as you go. Cool. Some offsite stuff. That was crazy all over the place. I hope that made sense. Some offsite stuff because I know I watched some of the previous broadcasts that you put on here. There's a ton of on-site stuff. I'll briefly glaze over this stuff. And for most people that have touched SEO, this is not news or anything crazy. So I'm absolutely a proponent of doing what I call amplification, which is trying to get more backlinks pointed towards your best articles. There is a big difference between do follow and no follow. A lot of people are really taking away any type of do follow links within their blogs because they're worried that they're pointing outwards to too many different sites and basically losing authority by doing so. So the big thing you have to bear in mind with backlinks is do follow is what you want because that has link juice. No follow is lower value, but still important. It is a trust indicator, excuse me, and these are easier to get. Some of the things that I would say are less valuable is getting an author bio. I haven't really seen as much value when I get a new link there. When it's towards kind of the upper part of an article and it's in line and it has the correct anchor text, which is basically what is being hyperlinked and pointing. That's probably the most valuable. I've seen less and less value coming out of these, like what we call pillow links or these directory listing profile pages, that kind of stuff. Super weak. Forums, I'm not seeing a ton of value unless it turns into a do follow eventually. And yeah, social media links, I have seen some indicators that when a post does well on social media, it does tend to jump up throughout the remainder of a month within like a 30-day window. You'll see that you'll end up getting a little more organic push out of it, which is interesting because it didn't used to be related. Most people know that .edu and .gov links are probably the most valuable links that you can get. They're also the hardest to get, and they're also the most, I guess, I don't know, cheated out of. So if you go to Conquer or Fiverr, you can find plenty of those, and it probably does more harm than good. I've definitely seen people get hit with some penalties for that. Link velocity is interesting. I'm trying to get maybe 2 to 4 new links a week per piece, depending on the nature of what I already have. That shouldn't be too unreasonable. It should be obvious. High authority stuff wins. If it's niche related, awesome. If it's low authority and totally not your niche, don't waste your time. I'm going to move on. There's like so much stuff in here. I'm just not going to spend a ton of time on this. Cool. So keyword strategy, I think, is one of the areas that I mentioned at the very beginning, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. The whole reason that we want to look up these different keyword strategies around our topics is to make sure that we're hitting the intent. So we're looking for, does it save time, save money, reduce headaches, improve quality of life, and produce positive emotion? Now, we need to find the different phrases that match that. So we got to start putting them into buckets. So, what I'll often do is try to figure out what is the product's unique selling proposition and what are the pages that are kind of built out within the website architecture. From there, I'll start to put in the clusters of keywords that make the most sense. So, on let's say it's a effectiveness. What's the So there's a company that I work with that does dashboards for like employee effectiveness. And so I found that trying to focus on the actual product page with some of the really granular benefits was way smarter than doing the education side, which takes place on the homepage. So there's definitely a method to the madness. But the cool thing about doing really effective keyword research is that you get to rinse and reuse it everywhere. So the keyword research that you do is probably going to be the stuff that resonates with people as you put out new campaigns and newsletters. Certainly for ads, if you're running Google Ads, for sure. Putting it into the sales doc so salespeople know exactly what language people use and search for in order to come up with the understanding of what your solution is. All of it works in kind of this crazy together way in order to provide some decent results. I also think that having a good understanding of your ideal customer profile really does help to get you there. But I'll show now how I build out my keyword universe. And hopefully, yeah, I can save a little bit of time for questions. I'm already running out of time. All right, I'll do this real fast, but this is kind of the really hard way of doing this. So like I saw so many different types of ways of generating keywords, and this has kind of served me well over the last 5 or so years, and I continue to kind of add different areas to it. But my goal is to basically create this ever expanding list of themes and general keywords that fall into buckets. So I'll create buckets based off of the niche, sector, or industry. And every industry and sector and whatever, area of the market you're in is going to be a little different. And sometimes it'll break further down into features and benefits. A big part of this is intent. When people search how to fix their biggest pain points in an industry, I have an entire column that's basically building out all of these major keywords that then I cluster these different keywords around them. A lot of questions. So if you go to answer the public, I have slides for that. I'll save that for later. Common keywords or common words, jargon that's really specific to an industry, buzzwords, any competitor keywords, I start to pull out and make sure that I filter through what comes out to be these major big themes or sections. And this is going to be incredibly useful for you to then build off of. So I don't know why I have that slide again. That's awesome. So building my list of keywords, I think in the earliest stages, I'm throwing it into like keyword shitter to start understanding a bit more, which is a really kind of slow and not great way of doing it. I think Keyword Surfer or Keyword Tool are actually, those are Chrome extensions. Those are really great for getting you through the earliest parts of trying to bubble out these different columns, these different themes of what's the intent, what's the biggest features, what's the biggest benefits, what's the biggest pain points, so that you have everything worked out in these different columns. In terms of finding questions that people ask within your niche, I start throwing in all kinds of different keywords into Answer the Public, QuestionDB, and FAQ Fox. I think those are great ways to start putting these questions either into the actual page copy, which is pretty bold, or within areas of your actual articles. Those are so valuable for grabbing answer snippets, it's not even funny. So the way that I end up doing this in many cases is trying to look at what are the biggest wins or the quickest wins as quickly as I can get them. That's not the slide to really show that. Here's another way to do it as well. I do think when you look at what is the activity or the trend behind a specific keyword, so is it on the upward cycle or are people talking about it more recently? You can definitely see that within Reddit. You can filter by last 30 days and either it's a pain point or a benefit or an industry buzzword. Okay, last little bit that I'll go into in terms of building out different lists of keywords and structuring it for the keyword universe. This is a screenshot of keywords everywhere, and I think it's incredibly useful to, yeah, build these out and have them in one place. As I get ready to start organizing these massive, super long, different columns, I start with the stoplight method. Red means hard or don't even bother. Yellow is medium difficulty, and green is easy. And my goal is to start ranking these by those difficulty rankings on my list. So a quick example of some of the pitfalls that happen within this. This is a question of how to lose weight. It's really hard to rank for. You're looking at a global volume, search volume of 252,000 people, right? 1,000 searches, which is pretty absurd. Now, something that's relatively similar to that would be like obesity versus fat. And you could see you go 260K to 357K. I have to start to think about what's the intent behind the word fat and where would it be used if I was building a weight loss website. I'm not sure if fat is necessarily the most important keyword unless it's in the context of a question. Cool. Last little bit that I'll go through. I promise I'll finish on time. So I try to do this KEI throughout Keyword Efficiency Index whenever I'm doing keyword research. That is super important, especially if you're a newer player. If you don't have a lot of authority as a website, you can see this in Ahrefs, or maybe you want to use the old school tool, Alexa, whatever floats your boat. But the idea is if you don't have a lot of traction online, it's going to be very difficult for you to capture very competitive keywords. It's just unlikely at best, not impossible, but unlikely. So I always try to do the balance of high search volume, and I can go locally or I can go globally. And I'm also looking for a low keyword difficulty. So if lots of people are searching for something and not a lot of people have content that ranks for this, then I stand a pretty good chance of stealing or grabbing that keyword. And there's lots of different ways to then build clusters around it. I realize I've gone in so many different directions, but I'm kind of like on the edge of time here. So yeah, I don't know. Did that resonate with anybody? I don't know if that was like too fast, too much.
Well, Tyler, awesome. But don't worry about questions. There is no questions. It might be because you're fast, but everything was clear. I guess this is the reason. Everything is clear. So I have a question. By the way, Alexa is going down in May 2022. Like Alexa will never will be live.
Yeah. I
So
thought it was weird that, oh, they're getting rid of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're getting rid of it, of this
Well,
tool.
it's about time.
Yeah, maybe not for SEOs, because always the client is coming. Oh, what's happening with my rank on Alexa? But
Yeah.
hey, Alexa is not a ranking factor. All right. So
True.
all right. So my question is really quick because we almost done here. How do you approach to low search volume keywords? Like, do you write any briefs for this kind of keywords? Because there is dozens of uh, long tail keywords which has no search volume at all or a really low search volume.
Yeah. Okay, so it depends on the niche. Like that's like every answer within SEO is like, when somebody asks a question, you go, it depends. So with B2B companies, so like one of the companies I work with does a lot of training within Agile and Scrum. And the total global search volume of some of the jargon and key phrases that they use very specifically is like, we're talking 1,000 for some of like the really valuable stuff. And it's quite difficult to then throw out stuff that has a total search volume of 100 if it's super valuable. So the thought process is, if you're working in a B2B space and by and large, the total search volume for most of the phrases is relatively low, then it's already a self selecting group, meaning it's going to be a lot easier to know like, wow, not a lot of people search for anything in this space. So if I get a keyword that has 100 global searches on a monthly basis, that's not bad. But if you're selling something like t-shirts and it's like a really well-known consumer product that we all consume or all have, then it's going to be a little more difficult. And I usually set the cutoff somewhere around 300 to 400 in terms of global search volume, and that tends to do an okay job. I think the other takeaway from that is, especially with like multi-lang, so here in Denmark or Sweden, you have a much smaller uh, subset of or population. They say that 60% of the internet is in English, and when you have a population of 4.5 million people, it means that a search volume of 1,000 is actually really high. And if it's in B2B, then holy smokes, you got something good here. So it's really difficult to say, and it's always like dependent on so many other factors.
Yeah. Cool. So thank you very much for your contributions, Tyler. It was really helpful, I guess, for everyone. And as I say before, you are out of this world. Thank you very much for participating here.
Thanks for having me, man. This was fun, and happy to always mix it up with you again. Thanks.
Cool. Happy Friday, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.